Before we get into today's interview, I want to remind everybody to go and support our partners in safety. They help make this podcast possible. Of course, I'm talking about Mighty Line Floor Tape. If you have issues in your facilities with layout, organization, maybe it's causing safety concerns, Mighty Line has you covered. You can 5S your entire facility without having to paint any of your floors. They have floor marking tape, they have logos. You can make custom signs with your logos. You've got all kinds of floor marking, directional arrows, signs. You want the little footprints on your floor to show people where to walk. They've got that stuff too. They've got grip tape. They've got line tape that is built to withstand forklift traffic. Look, don't take my word for it. Go to mightylinetape.com/podcast. Get a free sample of their floor tape today. Again, mightylinetape.com/podcast. Next up, we have Aero Safety. Aero Safety has been a supporter of the podcast for a long time. I've gotten to know Drew Hinton over there at Aero Safety. We've had Drew on several times on the podcast, and hope to have him back soon as well. We talk about a lot of safety management stuff, and we talk about all kinds of topics that are important to safety managers. One thing that you want to concern yourself with is if you have a need for any kind of support, whether it's written program development, audits, inspections, training for your workers, Aero Safety is going to be the one you want to call. They're going to customize an approach that fits your business needs, not some canned generic training or three-ring binder off the shelf and hand it off to you like it's your own safety program. It's going to be something that is designed specifically based on your needs. Aero has you covered with all of that stuff. Go to aerosafetyus.com and get a custom quote today. Again, go to aerosafetyus.com.
All right, we're here with Mark Alicea. Hi, Mark. How are you? We've been talking for a while about this. How you been?
I am right as rain, Blaine, and I'm really happy to be here. This is a bucket list item for sure.
Yeah, no, certainly for me. I love this topic we're going to get into because we've had so many discussions about this, even just you and I, and then even in a recent group of safety professionals. And it has to do with, I like to say, just our own confidence as professionals and how no matter where you are in your career, we could be almost crippled by this sometimes. And so what are we talking about? Put a name to this thing. There's some popular tags, but I know we're gonna put a name on it.
Yeah, and I think like the big topic, and it's addressed in lots of organizations today, both within the safety profession and outside the safety profession, but talking about imposter syndrome as being a really big kind of topic, not just kind of looking at, the safety profession and how that affects us as professionals, but also how it affects us as leaders, how it can impact and impede our growth and development, and then just kind of thinking through how that affects everybody, not just folks that are, later in their career, folks that are earlier in their career. It really does impact everyone, and so I'm excited to chat about it.
So why don't you introduce yourself to all of the listeners and folks that are going to be watching this, the video version of this. Let us know who is Mark, and then share your personal experience with this topic, which kind of sets us up for why we're even discussing this, right?
Yeah, sure. So that is, so just to kind of go over my career in general. So I've been in the EHS career for about 6 years now. And so what started as an internship as a safety specialist kind of evolved into a really, really strong passion that I feel for what we do and the work that we do. So when I was an intern safety specialist at one of our larger fulfillment centers in Virginia. Spent my summer there in 2019, absolutely fell in love with it and came back. And I I was for about 5 years afterwards. Then I held various roles from safety specialist to regional manager and everything in between. And so my latest role before I left was as an interim senior regional workplace health and safety manager, where I was responsible for all of delivery across the Midwest. So what we consider to be like Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, everything in that realm. I left at the start of the year to move to a programmatic role working on the global fire safety team. So a bit of a shift from going from EHS to more of a programmatic role within the EHS team. But I focus mainly on larger policy creation, build outs, construction, focusing on kind of more of the corporate aspect of fire life safety and how that impacts our workers. And so that's a bit about me from the career side. On the education side, I'm a Purdue University graduate, proud Boilermaker, graduated in 2020. And I'm currently wrapping up my master's degree from New York University with a focus on sustainable development goals with a highlight in environmental health and safety. So that's a bit about me, short and sweet from the education and the professional perspective. And the reason why I'm really excited to talk about this topic is because someone who I feel like has kind of risen through the ranks pretty quickly, right, for my career, kind of where I'm at. I'm only 27 years old for the context of the listeners. So to kind of have grown from that intern scope to more of the global scope that I'm in has definitely been quite a wild journey and certainly hasn't come without its bumps and its challenges. And imposter syndrome has certainly played a really big role in that, as I've had to question quite a lot. You kind of mentioned the two frames that we're going to talk about today is kind of imposter syndrome by competence and imposter syndrome by comparison. I certainly feel like early in my career, I've definitely been susceptible to both. And so I'm excited to kind of talk about those today and get a little bit into some of my personal experiences with those.
Yeah, I think, and that is so important. I mean, you covered a lot in your intro as to why we're talking, and you're interested in this topic. And to bookend this, 28 years in the industry, especially the second one that we're going to talk about, imposter syndrome by comparison. Man, that is way more common than people care to admit. And I think for professional development, this is important for us to recognize, when we're going through it, recognize it for what it is. But more importantly, how we can deal with that, how we can manage that, right? And so let's talk about your experience. One, imposter syndrome by confidence. And this is, I know enough? I don't know enough about this area, this topic. I'm, in here with a bunch of folks. It kind of bleeds over into comparison, but that's slightly different. But I'm running around with these folks that have been doing this for a long time. I don't know as much as they do. You might think that's by comparison, but it's really a confidence thing, right? Did you experience that early on? And how have you managed that? Because you don't get put in these positions for no reason at all, Mark. I know, and I've worked with you. I know you, so I know how you got there. And it wasn't faking it. You didn't fake it. How did you get your arms around this confidence piece up front early on?
Yeah. And so I think the biggest thing for me early on and how it impacted me was the fact that, just to kind of give context to, I guess, like the scope of the situation, was that starting off as a safety specialist in the logistics network, I started in the summer of 2020. So peak pandemic time operations. Yeah. And so at the time, the buildings were scaled in a way where there was one safety specialist supporting a single delivery station or delivery center. And so they're generally smaller in nature, but as that singular safety specialist, you're oftentimes the go-to subject matter expert for everything under the sun. And so as a new graduate, you kind of go from a setting where, and I obviously as an intern had a little bit of a head start, but for a lot of new grads at that time, you're kind of going from the classroom where you're learning about these things, but not necessarily practicing these things, to all of a sudden you're the subject matter for OSHA, for environmental, for code, for policy, for legislation, staying up to date on everything that comes down the pipeline. And at that time, with it being COVID too, you really didn't have as much on-site managerial support because it was COVID. Everybody was remote. Everybody was local. They didn't allow travel to stations. And so to me, I was kind of faced with a lot of these issues head on in trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to put the work forward to make my building safer? But how am I also going to learn and kind of scale up to your point? Like, how do I build that confidence over time? And honestly, truth be told, I think the biggest thing that you can do in that moment is just admit that you don't know. Right. And I think that's a really scary thing for a lot of people. But for me, I think I spent the first 2 to 3 months of my career bogging myself down by this warped perception that I need to know everything. And because I'm the safety specialist, I default need to know every single thing that's there versus, okay, I have a problem. I've been presented with a task. I'm going to do the research and I'm going to find out. And so the way that I built my confidence and the way that I kind of benchmarked myself as I went on was if someone would ask me a question, right? Like, let's say someone would ask me a really general question of like, in the city of New York, does the Department of Environmental Protection require this label or this label? If, as someone that only lived in New York for 2 months at that point, I'm not going to know the answer right away, but I can reply with, but I will find out and I will get back to you.
Yep.
And that's where you can leverage peers that you have, resources that you have, resources, whether it be online, textbooks, whatever it might be. I was able to then kind of gather that information together. And that way I would build that knowledge as I grew. And it wasn't a matter of, okay, I'm only going to use this piece of knowledge once and I'm never going to see it again. Because I'm constantly going to remember those resources. I'm going to bookmark those resources and I'm constantly going to reference back to them if I ever need to know anything. I remember at one point when I was a safety specialist, we didn't really have our record keeping team built out to the extent that it's built out now. And so I spent a lot of time bookmarking and saving LOIs one by one, which obviously looking back is not the most intuitive or productive thing to do, 6 years into the future. But at the time, it really did help me to where if I had any type of questions or concerns about record keeping, not only am I going to ask my peers, but I'm going to cross-reference with the resource that I built for myself. And so that's just something that, and like I said, everyone's going to have a different approach to that. But I think for me, the biggest thing that I could tell people to do is just admit you don't know, but always end with saying, I will find out and I will get back to you. Because that's the biggest thing that we can do as a support partner and as a resource.
Yeah. And then that helps you build something you talked about, competency. And I always love this phrase, confidence comes from competence. The lack of confidence, professionally speaking, more often than not, there are some personal, psychological issues that might be going on, but just speaking strictly as a professional, maybe I feel like I don't know as much as I should know. That the more competent you become, the more confident you will be. And then you're doing that, yes. But then you're also doing something else, right? Which is you're letting your peers know and the teams that rely on the safety resource to know that you are there for them. You will go find that out. You will bring the answer they need back. And so you're building a relationship in that regard. And they will come to trust you and they will come to you. And there's nothing more confident than I could think of than all these folks that you were like, oh my gosh, what am I doing trying to help these individuals that have been here for so long? There is no other confidence booster than to have them go, Mark, I need your help, or can you help me?
Oh yeah,
because they know you're going to go find it, right? You just got to get started. So
yeah. And I
good
think
stuff.
Yeah, and I think building the collaborative environment, I think really helps because I think a lot of the times, and I think I know we'll get into the comparison aspect of it, but I think I as a new grad definitely compared myself and kind of convinced myself at that point in my career that I didn't need these people to be successful and that I needed to be able to stand on my own. I remember one of the early stories is that there was someone that I visited in a new launch building that needed a little bit more support. And I remember in talking to him, I was just we were just kind of going over what's your background? Where'd you come from? And he confidently said, I have been in the EHS field for over 40 years. And I just remember in my mind, I was like, wow, I've literally been alive for half of that time, and this person has twice as much experience. And I remember initially being really kind of intimidated by this person and thinking like, okay, like I need to measure up to this person. But all the things I mentioned before, like being able to be resourceful and collaborative, I would ask him a question and he would have an answer for everything, right? Everything environmental, everything OSHA related, like everything that, you know, would help me learn and help me be better. And that was something that, you know, as I continue to grow throughout my career, I'm constantly impressed by the diverse perspectives that we have in the field and the diverse levels of experiences that help all kind of unite the same mission forward. And so I'm really, really kind of blessed to have had some of those perspectives in my career. And it pains me to think that I kind of handicapped myself that early on to be able to say, I don't need these people or I don't need to rely on this experience because I was kind of afraid of my own level of competence.
Do you think, now this is, I'm going to ask a loaded question, but do you think he just came out of college or out of the book knowing all those things?
Absolutely
No.
not. No.
He went through there's only so much they can shove into your head, right? That you can recall. There are exceptions, eidetic, or what do you call those? It's not photographic memory. It's something else. They could just remember things. But all of us, even myself, like I'm always using the phrase, I wish they would have taught me that in safety school. You have to experience, you have this base knowledge that's supposed to really spark your interest for continued learning and development. And then you never stop. I mean, look at me. I don't care. I could be coming up on 30 years here shortly before I know it. But I'm still like, Mark, what have you done to deal with this? Yeah. So I love talking to everybody. We can learn from each other. And that kind of gets us into the imposter syndrome by comparison. And I see this a lot. So I'm glad you brought up that individual, the more tenured. I don't care if you got your PhD, like that's the new master's degree now. And it's a good sign because, I mean, heck, we could do a whole episode on the democratization of degrees and how, you know, it kind of devalues them. You know, masters used to be, when I was younger, like, ooh, that was a big deal. And a PhD was reserved for those sages that were retired and they're going to go into the university, into the building, and then impart all their knowledge on everybody. And now it's like everybody's running around with this alphabet soup after their name, which is a good thing. The access to that education, I think, is huge. That where we didn't have it before, it was somewhat controlled, and I love that people can have access. People from all walks of life can have direct access to further education, advanced education, whether it's online through accredited universities, not like, some back of a magazine, back in my day, you sign up for this certificate in the back of a magazine, but like, education. With that though, I think comes, I see this a lot on LinkedIn of folks doing do you remember the fake it till you make it movement? I don't think it's as big now.
Yeah,
but
I remember. Yep.
Yeah, they called them learning leaders. And it was like, I'm going to do this and then I'm going to share my experience learning it so that others can learn it. I'm like, yeah, but then you took the experience away and you're just giving them information. You're just telling them what you learned without the value of having experienced it. So I'm a big believer in that. But getting back to imposter syndrome by comparison, everybody's got these degrees, advanced degrees in education, and that can, on its face, initially be intimidating. And so I'm wondering, do you think, and there's different types of comparison that we make, do you think intimidation is a big one? And that kind of speaks into confidence, but really it's, I come knowing what I know, and then boom, I'm hit with this 40-year salty old safety professional And I'm going to say Brenda she was my first professor, taught safety risk management, and I like just blown away by everything she knew. And this is back in the early 90s. I went back and taught her class. She retired, and I went back and taught that class at the same college. But that's how she inspired me. But you don't know that then. I'm just sitting there going, I'm screwed. So that's
Yeah.
confidence. But now I look back and go, I know how she did it. I know now because I went back and taught the class that she
Yeah.
taught me. By comparison, what are we doing to ourselves? How does that hold us back? And what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's an extreme limiter, right? Because I think
Yeah.
like you start getting into the realm of things that you can't control, right? And that was something that for me was such a big factor in kind of what I fear like was pretty detrimental, right? Into like not just kind of like my mental health as I was growing through my career, but also to my professional development, because I was constantly thinking about like, okay, like, you know, there's this other person, right, who's at the same point in their career that I am, and they're moving faster. Why are they moving faster? What are they doing that I'm not doing? Like what am I not good enough for that? Like what do I need to be doing differently to get? And I think that to the super smallest degree is healthy, right? To question, okay, what could I be doing differently? Like what can I maybe do to mirror some styles a little bit? But at the end of the day, like when you let it get to the point where you're just nonstop thinking about what is this person doing? What do I have to be doing that's just like what they're doing, but better? You start to really kind of limit yourself. And it starts to become less about, okay, what can I do to build myself as a technically competent professional? And it then gets into the realm of, okay, well, I'm trying to just copy somebody else's career. And you know, right, just as well as I do, that not one career trajectory is the same and no one's
Right.
path is the same. And I've certainly learned that as someone who's started a new job and entered a new space this year. That growth is definitely not linear. And I think because I drew so many comparisons of myself to other people, it kind of made it seem like it was. And that if I was in a role for too long, or if I was backsliding into something different, that then I was then doing a disservice to my career. And that reflected on my character as a person, my work ethic. And it's just spiraled into a lot of things that became so uncontrollable at that point. There was one particular peer that we're constantly pitted against each other. And I remember I got promoted first. She got promoted like a month later. Then she got promoted again. And I got promoted a month later. And to me, I just remember at one point I was so like focused and fixated on like needing to kind of like compete with this other person when at the time, and it's so silly to like think about it, you know, looking back,
Yeah.
we were in two completely different areas. Like it's not like she was at the building next door. She was in another region, let alone another state. And so to compare the trajectories of two different people, you know, there's things that I wasn't considering, like relocation, right? Different opportunities being open. Like I'm not moving to South Carolina anytime soon. So why would I care if someone just got promoted to an opening in South Carolina? And so I think there's a lot of things and different factors that affect someone's growth and mobility. And I think because I drew those comparisons and I didn't consider those factors, it really did kind of inhibit me a lot. And it got to the point where, you know, again, like I'm constantly, you know, limiting myself and limiting the things that I'm working on because they're not important, because this person worked on something different than me. So I need to work on that same thing. And so it definitely was something that as I grew out of it and I grew to kind of see the bigger picture with everything, really did make such an impact on not only how I learned from other people and I grew from learning from other professionals, but it also gave me a lot more confidence that, and you kind of alluded to it before, like we're all here for a reason. We didn't get here by accident. And so it really just kind of taught me to trust myself and what I was doing in the career that I was building, without having to rely on anybody else.
Yeah, and I think it's a mental trick, and it worked for me. I had great mentors throughout my career, growing up in my career, whether it was in the fire service, and certainly in private industry as well, in the private sector. I think if you recognize that sort of almost envy, you know, of hey, how, you know, I want to do that. Why didn't I get that? Or which is one thing, but also imposter syndrome by comparison, meaning like, hey, one day I'm fine with my development and my professional acumen. And then all of a sudden I'm in a room or in a meeting or I meet somebody in the company that's like a little further ahead than me. And I'm like, oh man, like
Yeah.
I thought I was doing really well. I guess I'm not. Like I'm screwed, right? Reach out to that person if they're a decent person, right?
Oh yeah.
It's got to be, you got to have a willing participant, but mentor, be a mentee. Say, hey, how did you get here, and did you choose this path? How did you set out a plan for yourself? And you might find more often than not, you start picking little things that are interesting that you could see and you using in your career, in your life. And then other things you're like, oh, that makes sense. They had a small family, they got married later in life, or they got married early in life, and they like so it, everything isn't apples and apples.
Yeah.
Everybody's on a slightly different path, but maybe headed in the same general direction. And I think the trick is when you feel yourself feeling a certain emotion that isn't good, whatever that emotion is, envy, jealousy, fear of, being left behind or not developing fast enough. But if you feel a negative emotion, flip it around and go, focus on what you can control. I can control my choices. I can control my path to an extent. Start asking them, and that's what I would recommend, and it works for me.
Yeah.
I talk to people all the time from different parts of their career that are business owners here on the podcast. That's why I love doing the podcast. I feel guilty because I'm literally like just absorbing information from these all these professionals I talk to, yourself especially. But that's the trick I've learned. And the other thing you said, which was important, is you know thyself, right?
Yeah.
I am not moving to wherever for a job. It's not going to happen. That's my choice. That's just where I am. I've been in this house 27 years, built this house from the ground up almost, rebuilt it, I should say. We have family here. I'm not moving.
Yeah.
And I also know what I love. I know what I'm really good at. There's a reason why I don't want to be, I don't know. I'm going to say it like it's a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It's just not for me. I'm not going to be an executive. I don't want to be. I want to work with and talk with folks that are out at the sites, doing the job, where the work happens, the workers, the people that help us build this company. That doesn't mean an executive position is bad. It's not. We need them. We 100% need them on our side. It's a company. It's a team, right? I just know where I'm most valuable and what I will get the most out of the role as well for myself, which then makes me more excited and a harder worker.
Yeah.
So, oh yeah, I know I'm limiting my career, but that's the myth, is that this career is this straight line from bottom left to top right, and that if you're not on a sustained path in that, with that right attitude, right, a little aviation lingo, going up, that rate of climb is consistent, then you're doing something wrong. Not true. That is not true. And yeah, and so I think what you said about knowing what's good for you and knowing where you want to be, but then also not being afraid to talk to other people and ask them how they did that and where are they going? How did they come up with a plan for their career? When did they know? And you have to do all of that. And I think that for me helped squash those negative emotions and turned them into some action for me.
Yeah, and I think and I think you absolutely nailed it by saying it's a myth, right? To think that like your career has to be this constant upward trajectory. And I think like in my generation especially, it is very much kind of set, I think, is the norm, right? Where it's like you should want to get into a career and then grow as fast as you can. And I think just my word of caution that I always give to people, and I say that because I kind of had a little bit of a reputation with how fast I grew. And I would get a lot of comments from peers and from direct reports saying like, I want to do what you did, right? And as much as I'm flattered to hear that, it was really, really a tough adjustment. And I think like for how kind of fast I grew, there were a lot of things that I was missing at every single step that looking back, I wish I had before stepping into those positions. And obviously I've gained them back, right? And I kind of made up for lost time a little bit. But when we talk about how hard imposter syndrome hits and how hard that hits, I was 22 when I first got promoted after about 7 months in the safety specialist role. So I went from this hourly individual contributor role to I'm a sub-regional manager leading at the time, because we were expanding so quickly, like 16 buildings and a team of 20 people. And I was so ill-equipped, Blaine. Like I had proven myself as a very successful individual contributor, but then I enter this people scope and I'm having to manage conflict for the first time in the safety realm. I'm having to manage interpersonal conflict between specialists, conflict between operators, working through different projects, new launches, build outs. I was so in over my head, and everyone's kind of talking to me like, wow, Mark's really got it together at this point in his life. And I'm kind of sitting here behind the scenes like, what the heck did I do? How did I get here? And it really did. I can talk about it in jest now, but looking back, it was a very, very difficult time mentally for me, because I was constantly, having this inner combat within myself about, do I deserve to be here? Was I ready for this opportunity? Did I get promoted too soon? And I think, and not to say that, it's by design, but I do think that because I went in with the mindset of I need to grow as fast as humanly possible, I became a good fit, but I did not establish myself as a good fit for the safety profession. So what I mean by that is that obviously, I, embodied the leadership principles, right? I did everything that a top performer should be doing in order to get promoted. But when it goes back to the, imposter syndrome by confidence, I did not have the technical competency that my direct reports did. I did not have a lot of the innate knowledge that I should have had at that point in my career, especially to be considered a resource from a manager perspective who's leading safety specialists. And I think at the end of the day, as much as it would have angered me to admit it all the way back then, I kind of wish I would have taken a little bit more time to bake, to sit, to work on refining some of those things. So that way I don't promote into the next role and then flounder, but instead I promote into that next role ready, confident, to not just be able to set an example for others, but to set an example for myself as well.
Oh, so you're adding another wrinkle to this, which is I would call it internally driven versus organizationally driven. As an organization, we could be I'm not speaking about any particular organization we've been affiliated with or worked with, but in general out there in business, for anybody listening and watching, organizations can step into this trap of, oh, everybody loves this person. This person is always bringing the right reports to the meeting and always seems to have their stuff together. This person can lead a team of other people like them. And let's put him or her up there. We could be promoting too soon as an organization, right?
Yeah.
And or maybe we're incentivizing that culture of competitiveness and just inadvertently with the way we've set up our, expectations of what we want for people. That's interesting that you mentioned that piece. But again, going back to anybody watching or listening that's going through this or has gone through this and has something to share on this, please, we would love to have you comment on this post, but wherever you're watching or seeing this or listening to this. But it goes back to what you said earlier, which is have that mindset of, okay, this is new. Somebody's expecting me to deliver. This is a task. This is this is a problem. It's problem solving 101. Let me go research. Let me go map this out. Let me go find out what I need to find out. And through that, you'll learn. You get the technical knowledge and experience. You can't unlearn it,
Right.
but you have to meet each one of those expectations that people put on you with what you said. Like, that's a great question. I had not had that asked of me before. I've not dealt with that before, but I'm going to go find out. Right. I'm going to take that opportunity. So it's a balance of saying, whoa, that's slow your roll. Right? So there's one that you're helping that external driver slow down. And then internally you're going, I can do this. This is simple. I just got to go learn about what this is. Maybe I'll talk to a colleague. How did you deal with this? Oh, that makes sense. Line everything up and go, here's what I think it might look like here at our site or in our company or whatever. And then you talk with the team. And if you just keep doing that, that replaces that negative. It's that fight or flight. There's actually a third one nobody talks about, which is freeze. It's a
Yeah.
fight or flight instinct of your deer in the headlights is the freeze, where you're like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. I've never had to deal with this. And you don't have a plan, so you just freeze. Well, people are going to stop coming to you. You're not going to go anywhere because you're frozen. You're stuck, literally and figuratively, in your career. But you have to replace that with a plan. So I guess I would ask anybody watching or listening, what's your plan to continuously develop in the areas that you might feel like you're not very confident in? How do you gain the competency needed to generate that confidence? So you should start thinking about that now.
Yeah, and that's what I implore folks in their early career too to think about, is that instead of making the mindset or like coming up with the mindset of, how do I grow as fast as humanly possible up the leadership chain, we should be setting a lot of personal goals and personal objectives. I gave this feedback to somebody else that I was mentoring a while ago, who was, a little bit kind of frustrated with their timeline and was kind of looking at like, okay, well, like what does my future look like if the carrot keeps getting moved further and further down the line? And I said, you set goals for yourself, right? You say, hey, I want to have this scope or this title by this time. And if I can't get that from the organization that I'm a part of, I'm going to find it from somewhere else, right? And I think when we do that and we start creating goals that are more internally driven and not externally motivated by other organizations, that's how we develop those competencies, right? Like that's where we say, okay, my goal at my 1 year is to get my ASP, or it's to, join like this type of convention or conference so I can get more exposure, network with X amount of people, mentor somebody, right? Whatever it might be. If we set those goals for ourselves and allow ourselves to grow internally, right, then at that point you become so much more of a well-rounded professional that if the organization that you're a part of doesn't match the timeline, or if it's not a timeline that you agree with, you've then built the skills and the knowledge and the maturity for yourself to then say, okay, well then I can take these skills and find a job elsewhere where I will get matched for what I'm looking for, whether it's scope, title, compensation, whatever it might be. But when we set those goals internally, then the carrot getting dangled, so to speak, starts to not matter anymore, because then you're thinking, okay, I can just find my own carrot, right? Or create my own carrot, wherever it might be. That's kind of a cheesy analogy, but that really is kind of what I would recommend to anybody that's in that position, because I recognize once I started doing that, carrots and cheese.
Carrots and cheese. You're talking. Is it lunchtime? I think we might be hungry. So absolutely. So let's get into the advice portion of our discussion. Like, okay, we've kind of covered what we've been through and what we've had to deal with and what others might deal with, and we've given some tips. But what about you've written, you sent me a note here, and I like this one here. Always celebrate accomplishments. Talk about that real quick.
Yeah. And so this was something that really kind of came to me as an aha moment when I was preparing for final step for promotion into senior leadership. And it's a very, very heavily prepared for event that usually has months of planning and practice interviewing. And it wasn't until then that I really kind of really took a step back, and I've always preached this to others and really didn't practice it myself necessarily because I still have that inner voice in my head. But it wasn't until I really kind of outlined everything that I had worked on in my career up to that point that I was like, wow, I've done some really cool stuff that to me, right, or to folks that, have been with the company for many, many years or been in this field for many, many years, we might see as, regular schmegular, just stuff that we do on a day-to-day. But until you really, really kind of take a step back, I was going over a lot of my interview stories with my partner, who's completely not in the safety field, although she's heard me talk about it so much, she probably could be in the safety field. But I'm telling these stories to her, and I kind of gave what I thought were some of my weaker stories. And she was like, Mark, that's incredible, right? Whether it's, helping X amount of people, rolling out a project that improves upon, thousands and thousands of lives, saving money because we're not hurting people, right? Like a lot of these things that pool together are really incredible. And I think the reason why I'm so passionate about that piece of advice in our profession is because a lot of the times we do these things every day and we don't realize it, right? Because it just becomes so normal. You naturally become kind of numb to it. And I think when you really step back and you look at what you accomplish in a given day at work, let alone, 1 year, 5 years, whatever it might be, it's really quite fantastic. And something that I started doing at TikTok was something very similar, where like I would talk about kind of the things I was working on and the things we were building out. And as I started to look at the scale of which a lot of these things spread to, I was thinking, holy moly, that's like, I've got programs that are in South America. And I'm like, I would have never imagined that something that I would do would be seen on another state, let alone another continent. And so it's really just something that I just can't tell people to do enough, because especially as safety professionals, the work we do is so critical in every single space. And to be able to celebrate what we do and just kind of move past the feeling of, oh, well, it's just another day in the life is such a huge way to get past that initial hump. And it's something that I wish we did as a society, did a lot more.
And you're right. It has to be by design. It doesn't happen accidentally. That sort of step back occasionally, periodically step back and go, what have I accomplished? What have I done? Did it move us in the right direction? What was the impact? What did I learn from it? What did I experience from it? It's easy to, we call it getting in your 3-foot world, right? Emergencies are a good example of this. And when an emergency happens, you get in your 3-foot world. That's the only thing that matters. Somebody's injured, a fire, a vehicle accident, something like that. You get into this 3-foot world. Another example, less dramatic, would be like standard work. Oh, I've got to do my daily walk, and then you get into that 3-foot world. While you're there, because it's not an emergent situation, lives aren't at stake literally, in that moment, but try to expand that view a little bit while you're on that walk. Yeah, you've got to check these 15 things on this sheet of paper or tablet for your kids nowadays. But engage with workers. What could we do in this area of the facility that would make it better while I'm out? Use it to generate ideas. So one, you're there doing the work, you're doing the standard work, you're checking to make sure that our 5S and housekeeping program is being followed because stuff is in order. But then at the same time, you're like, hey, I just was talking to somebody and they were explaining how they do this job, and if we had a rack over there instead of right over here, they've told us that would have you could come up with so many ideas. So it's got to be purposeful. You got to teach yourself to be able to do that. You got to be strategic and tactical at the same time. And that's hard, but it can be learned.
Yeah. So, yeah. And I think like, even just like recognizing that, like, there's a difference between, impact in the sense of like, something actually physically manifested from them. Like kind of you mentioned, like we're putting a rack over here that might improve efficiency or make someone's life easier, might improve ergonomics. But then there's also the psychological aspect of, wow, someone's listening to me give feedback about my workplace.
Yes.
Right. And like there's someone who's a member of the leadership team that is taking their time, right, to chat with me, hear my perspective, and then, try to go ahead and implement it. So like what I said earlier at the beginning was, that rationale of I don't know the answer, but I'll get back to you. That applies to everybody, right? And like I would often tell, like if an associate would come to me with a concern, or right now at TikTok, if a peer comes to me with a question or a concern, I will always say, even if I know the answer, right? I'll give them the answer, but I'll always follow up with some action on my end. And I think just hearing that from the employee perspective and having someone who's been there and kind of been able to give my feedback and to hear that response is such a psychologically validating thing to hear. And I think like just being able to have that impact, it seems like the smallest thing when you do it every single day. But when you look back and you establish yourself as a leader that's that dependable and reliable and safe to talk to, it's such an important person to have in any building, in any culture, in any organization.
Yeah, I think, and as we kind of wrap this up, I think you're right. I think if you want to help yourself, I think the way I always wrap this stuff up with people when we get into these topics, and I'm going to give you the last word. I know because you have the last bullet point on your notes here, which I love. If you want to help yourself, help others. I subscribe to, we used to call it servant leadership. Service before self is usually a sentiment that you'll hear from somebody in the military or the emergency services. Service before self. If you want to earn people's trust, you can't demand it. You can't expect it. But if you want to learn, start helping others. Ask others, what can I do? What can I do for you? How can I help you? They will tell you. And then that just starts this ball. If you put others first, then I know I've experienced this many times in my life, and others have too. Others have taught me this as well. Is you first seek to serve others, you will get rewards. Trust me, it will help your career, but it will also help just your body and soul, man. It's just going to be good for you.
Yeah. And I just think like the final point is just be kind to others, right? Like I think like it's just incredible to like, we say it every day. It's like, you hear it a billion times. You see it in some very like artsy quote font on Instagram that someone reposted and you think, oh, cool, I've seen that a billion times today. But it really is truly like, it's such an important part of just understanding that we're all human, and that like behind the title, behind whatever it is, like we're all just people that are just looking to, hopefully, right, to some degree, like just make life better for everyone. Yeah. And I think kind of going back to that servant leadership and thinking like, what can I do for you? You also have to think, what can you do for yourself, right? Like, what can you do to be nicer to yourself, to be kinder to yourself? Because as safety professionals, we all work hard, right? We all have a tremendous amount of pressure at any given time with the type of work that we're in. And so just being able to, we talked about celebrating accomplishments, but also celebrate day to day, right? Celebrate the fact that you showed up to work today and you put a smile on your face and you got some work done. Or that maybe you're having a really bad day, or maybe there's something really stressful going on outside of work, but you chose to show up anyway. Celebrate that and be kind to yourself for that. Because that's something that I feel like early in my career, I never thought of my like leadership in that way, like having like, those types of feelings. I don't know why. I think just at the time I just kind of viewed them as being so far away from me until I became very open about my feelings and emotions with the folks on my team. And I really do think it helped kind of foster a culture of openness, transparency. There was one time, and I'm definitely not afraid to talk about this now, but I was in a building on a walk one day, and I was having a really bad day, to be honest. It was a combination of work and personal related factors, but I was having a really bad day. I had a skip level one-on-one scheduled for that day with someone in my organization. And I messaged them just to say, hey, like, I'm going to be honest, it might be TMI. I've been crying like half the morning. I'm going to take the rest of the day off. can I reschedule for a different day? And that leader, we ended up having our meeting the next day, and she said, hey, like, I just wanted to say, like, thank you for sharing that, because I was also having a really bad day, right? But I didn't, but because I knew that this was like an important meeting, you're my skip level manager, I didn't want to cancel. But because you were open with me, that allowed me to feel more open about sharing that with you. And she shared stuff with me during that meeting, which we were then able to action on, right? And make her life easier in some ways. And so it's really, truly remarkable how, like, when we allow ourselves to be kind to ourselves and kind to others and open, right, about the fact that we're all human, it's such a abstract kind of statement on paper. But when you actually do it, it's like, it's night and day compared to an organization where you might not feel safe to do those things.
Yeah, I have definitely, how do I want to say it? I'll say it in a funny way. I have never been accused of being too open with me. It is something that I've had to work on. But yeah, you're right. It's when I was leading various teams, they want to know that they can trust you, you know? And so, and I think whenever I've been in doubt in certain situations, I always think of them first. Like when somebody's like, I have a meeting scheduled. Meetings are the perfect one. Everyone, it's so easy to get frustrated. Like this person says, hey, something came up. I'm dealing with something. Can we reschedule? I'm like, oh, come on. Like, and it's like, no, you know what? Let me know if I can be of any help whatsoever for you. Don't worry about it. Like, let it go. Let that go. You never know what you're doing for somebody by giving them that, you know? And 100%. So, and that takes work. Like, so everybody watching and listening, just, you know, just as Mark says, be kind to others. Figure out how to be kind to yourself. Give yourself a break. And I love what you said, the everyday stuff. Sometimes it's just rolling out of bed is the win. A small win is still a win. Absolutely.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with that more.
All right. Well, Mark, thanks so much for taking time to talk about this topic. This is something that I think about a lot, and I know we've talked offline many times about this, and hope to continue the conversation about this or other topics as well. I'm so glad you were able to find time to join me today on the podcast.
Yeah, Blaine, thank you so much for having me. Like I said, it's a bucket list item, so I'm happy we could do it.
Well, the bucket's not full. We keep going. So I'll hold you to that. We'll have you on many, many more times. I appreciate it, Mark. Thanks.
Yes, sir.